As I mentioned, we're bringing our sermon series, The Love, to a close, and we're going to be closing with one of the most important things that can happen to anybody, and that is being saved by God's grace. Because when we're saved by God's grace, it liberates us to live the life and do the good that God has created us for. And this is rooted in that scripture passage I just read in the Bible, but I'll read that one verse again. For it is by grace that you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. This morning I want to talk about two basic ways that we try to save ourselves. One is through performance, and Paul talks about this, through our works. We believe that if we work hard and we pursue our goals, hey, look at these ladders, we start climbing the ladders that the society has given us, then we can be successful. We can gain our goals, live our dreams, become super buff, or, just model beautiful. Whatever it is that we feel that the society has given us, we begin performing our way. And another way to do life is through grace, where God gives us grace, and God's grace saves us through a relationship with Jesus Christ that says you don't have to work so hard to achieve these goals that society has laid out for you, but you can partner with God, and knowing that you are sufficient in God's love and the work that you are pursuing now. It's really interesting that because we all need to be rescued and saved and delivered in various different ways. One of the most common ways that we try to save ourselves is when we say things like, I'm going to improve my existence by climbing the ladder of success, a ladder of greater wealth, or maybe it's a ladder of impressing other people. In America, we're climbing all these ladders. It's just in the atmosphere, it's in the water, and then our egos become insatiable. There's been research done on this question. Do you consider yourself to be a very important person? This question, when it was asked in 1950, 12% of everybody in America that was surveyed said, I consider myself to be a very important person. Now, turn to the person next to you and guess what that number is in 2015. How many people say that they are a very important person? All right. Okay. Okay, that number, the correct answer by 2015 in America, 80% of us believe that we are very important people. That tells us something, doesn't it? So we teach our kids, it spills over into our families, doesn't it? We teach our kids, hey, climb these little ladders. And we tell them, climb these ladders, get good grades, study really hard, get into a really good school, make mom and dad proud. But it's crushing them. This is the direction our society is going. Last week in the New York Times, there was an article that asked, why are more American teenagers suffering from severe anxiety? They realized that we have now come to the point where more teenagers are visiting getting professional psychological help. More than depression, it is now severe anxiety. Severe anxiousness has now surpassed depression. It tells a story of a guy named Jake, this young junior high student in the suburbs of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And he's in 3 advanced placement classes. He's on the Model UN team that's traveling and touring. And one day, he suddenly refuses to go to school. He doesn't even want to come out of his bedroom. He's feeling overwhelmed by the pressures of life to succeed. And he's paralyzed by fear of failure. The article points out that severe anxiousness has now suppressed depression, as I've already mentioned. And so UCLA's Institute for Higher Education Research found that in 1985, 18% of the incoming freshmen said that they had felt overwhelmed by what was going on in their lives. And by 2010, it increased to 29%. By 2016, they said it had soared. 41% of incoming freshmen said that they had experienced they had experienced feeling overwhelmed in the previous year. In the past 10 years, the teen suicide rate has doubled. Just take a moment to pause and think about those numbers. Those aren't just imaginary numbers. Something is going out in society. Something is going on in America that's causing us, our values, our actions, and what we prioritize as a country, what we're doing or not doing as a church, is all adding to this that's going on in our society. I don't need to tell you folks, these statistics are not a good thing. But yet the Bible is very clear and sheds some light on this situation. And the problem that the Bible calls this situation is our human condition of sin. It's a word that's largely lost its meaning in today's society. But the idea of sin is not that you've broken some rules or there's some religious laws that you haven't satisfied. Sin is putting the wrong things on top of the ladder, and then we blindly pursue them. Pastor and author Tim Keller of New York puts it like this. He says, sin is taking a good thing, like being successful, having a healthy having a relationship, or whatever it is, and making it the ultimate thing. It will destroy me, and yet we become enslaved to it. Wherever we put up on top of that ladder, we may devote our entire lives to it, and then become enslaved by whatever is on top of that ladder. And so these types of things, this type of pressure that we put on ourselves can often lead to addictions, and all sorts of problems can come from the blind pursuit of pursuing what's on top of the ladder. One of the problems that we also face with this concept of sin is that the sin can get deep within inside us. And when it gets deep inside us, it begins to mess up our lives. Well, we don't even know it's there. Even some of our closest people around us may not even be able to see it, but it's there. Sin happens, and it's part of the dynamic of sin, that when it happens to me, I'm most likely not to know about it. Some things we can feel guilty about, some things we know that we did wrong, but as we said, the Bible points out that human beings are prone to egotism, self-centeredness, and selfishness, and arrogance, and pride. So if that's true about human nature, then we're going to be often deceiving ourselves. And that deception is so deep that we don't even know that it's happening. The psalmist puts it like this: but who can discern their own errors and forgive my hidden faults? Well, only God can. One of the weird parts about sin is that, I'll be very aware of your sin. I'll be very aware of your sin. But it's really hard to see our own sin. There's this funny old story about someone who had a dream, and so let's just say it was me, and I'm in heaven, and I'm walking down the hall, and I see all these clocks, and they're moving at different speeds. And so I asked St. Peter, what is this? And he said, well, these are sinometers, and every time someone sins, it spins and it clicks. And so they're going at different speeds. So I see Patty Hendricks' sinometer, and it seems like every 60 seconds it ticks. I see, where's another good saint of ours here? Pat Williams, yes. One of our beloved saints here, and every 15 seconds it ticks. I look for my wife's sinometer, and it's going tick, 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 just as I thought. That sinful woman. But then I said, well, I don't see my sinometer. So I asked St. Peter, what's going on? Is it what I think it is? I'm sinless. And St. Peter says, no, your sinometer is in the office, and they're using it for a fan. Oh, my Lord. Who can discern your hidden faults? Who knows? Who has any ideas? I see it in other people, and like I said, sin is not just about breaking some rules, or religious rules. It's about putting the wrong things on top of the ladder that we pursue. And sometimes we just begin climbing the wrong ladder. And this sin, this desire to climb these ladders, sometimes it's just inevitable. And it's unconquerable because we have a tendency in our lives as human beings to foul up our lives. I foul up things in my life, and then I foul it up for others. But every once in a while we do get a glimpse of it. I remember a time when I was playing tennis with some friends, and there was a line judge, and I remember just watching that ball. It was questionable. line or not. And I, I was between me and the line judge, and I just, let's just win this thing. And I remember saying, hey, it's out. And I got the point, but I saw the line judge, in the locker room later, and he gave me that look like, I know, it was out. And I felt ashamed, I felt convicted at that moment of the embarrassment. But it's something that I remember. That's the thing, is that so many of us, we don't even realize how many times that we've lied or cheated, and maybe nobody noticed, and maybe we didn't get called to account for it, but in our human nature that it's there. And then I think about God, that we have a God that loves us and cares for us and wants the best for us, but this God is holy and perfect. And I'm going to have to stand before this God who knows all of these things. And I realize that that's the reality that I live in. It's the reality of who I am and who you are. This is who we are, and it's a problem. We don't even realize how much sin has pervaded our lives, and it brings and it hurts us. And many of the times we think, hey, I can handle things in this life. I can take care of this. I can take care of that. The Apostle Paul talks about that idea that we're not saved by our works. But in this day and age, a lot of people begin climbing the work of ladders. And back in his day, they were climbing religious ladders. They said, as Pharisees, we had all these 613 laws, and if we would live these laws, then we can be better. Our men's Bible study is reading a book by Adam Hamilton, and in that very first chapter, it just talks about how Paul understood this concept so well. Paul was a brilliant student. He had gifts, so when he was in Antioch, which was modern-day Turkey, in that town, he had studied Judaism, and he must have excelled there. And so his father must have sent him to Jerusalem to study under the great teacher Gamaliel. And under Gamaliel, he excelled there, and so he became entrusted by the Pharisaic leaders of the day. Your job, because you are so brilliant and you are so bright, and you are, this is a moment for you to really rise up in the Judaic world. We want you to persecute those Christians. We want you to arrest them. We want you to harass them. We want you to throw them in jail. And, and if need be, you can execute them. Paul understood how deeply sin and the pursuit of rising up in one's mind and being successful in one's society can really do a lot of damage. I think sometimes people think, there's good people, and then there's bad people. And, I'm a little bit better than the average, so, I'm a good person. I go to church sometimes, I give sometimes, I read the Bible sometimes. I'm not nearly as bad as the next guy. This is how we begin justifying our sin. I begin comparing myself to someone who really is bad, we say, and then, they're one of the bad people, I'm doing okay, I'm high enough on a ladder, and it becomes really interesting. A couple of weeks ago in our modern day society, the way people do this is by saying, I hold the right ideology. Well, I'm a good person because I embrace the right ideology. I'm opposed to intolerance. I'm opposed to bigotry. I'm opposed to militarism. I'm opposed to injustice. I'm opposed to corporate greed. And there are bad people who aren't. But that's still, even as we point our fingers at all the other people, doesn't change the tendency that I have to foul things up. A lot of people also say in California, this is the land of innovation, new business startups, Hollywood media, and you go to Northern California, you've got technology. They think that technology is going to save the world. But there's a weird thing. They have not developed a invention or a app for your iPhone that will correct the human heart's tendency to foul things up, lie and cheat, deceive, be greedy, and betray. There's no app for that I've seen. And into all of this mess of the darkness that is my life and yours comes Jesus. Then comes Jesus. And there comes another way to do life, which is called grace. Now, as Paul says, there's the way of works and performance, and then there's this way of peace through Jesus Christ, where God comes down. And so, for the way of grace is not trying to climb the ladder of religion to God, But actually, it is Jesus Christ who comes down the ladder and says, you don't have to climb any more ladders. I love you as you are. I know that you want to improve your life. And so the Bible doesn't say that, hey, you don't want to have a healthy families, have a healthy business, have a healthy career. Those are good things. But what Jesus is offering is to say, don't make those the main things in your life. You know, those things can be very important. But if you're going to pursue them, then pursue them with me. Pursue them in a way that's going to be a blessing. Not only to yourselves, but also to those around you. It's how we can live ethical Christian lives that are a blessing to the world and not just about pursuing our own goal. You know, and so God gives us the cross in Jesus Christ, where the beam coming down just points out that we can't save ourselves. And so God had to send Jesus Christ to die for our sins. And then we have the beam that goes this way, where Christ's arms opens up and embraces all of those who are willing to come to him, and saying, you can put down your burdens and your pursuits and all the pressures of fear of death, or the fear of not succeeding, or the fear of not living up to the images that you think, these goals, these artificial goals that society has given you, or these images of success and beauty. You know what? You can lay them down at the cross and just be embraced by my love. Because I bled for you, and I love you, and I sacrificed for you, so you may be able to live free. And that's grace. Grace comes because God is telling people who are in the rat races of life that, you know, you don't have to live there, you don't have to be there. You know, there's so many ways that when we think about this, that God is doing so much more than we can ever accomplish. We can't atone for our own sins. Only God can. You know, there's a professor named William Backus who did a study. He says that, you know, the average American practices 200 acts of deception a day. That we are sinful through our body language, through the things that we say, and the things that we hide. You know, these little traits and things that we do that. Now, let's say that that's exaggerated. Say we only sin 10 times a day. 10 times 365 days, you know, you extrapolate that out. You know, say you live 70 years of your life, and you've exceeded that number. But say you live 70 years, and say the first 10 years are past because you're a little kid. And, you know, over a lifetime, you will have sinned 200,000 times. You know, you may be thinking you're good, but before that type of sin, the only answer for that is God's grace. And when God's grace happens in a life, it totally can transform an individual. You know, I want to just close with a reminder of those statistics that I gave earlier about how American society, you know, I can see the decline and influence of Christianity, and then I can also see the increase of people's raw pursuit of climbing these ladders that society has given us. And it's putting pressure on our families, putting pressure on our marriages, putting pressure on our grandkids and great-grandkids. You know, churches like Northminster can offer the grace of Jesus Christ through faith. It is not us that does the work, but it is God who does the work. But yet God needs a people. And God uses a people to say the communities are hurting. There are families in need. You know, as I mentioned the statistic, in a 1 mile radius of Northminster, 70% of the people living here are families. And maybe on any given Sunday, 12% of the people are in church. You know, and I'm not saying just church attendance is the only thing, because before we even want them to come to church, we've got to be able to develop a relationship with these, you know, 95% of the people that are not even attending any of the churches in Diamond Bar. Because there is such a need out there for people to hear about the love and grace that they can get off the rat races that they're on, and they can come to Jesus and know God's love, and know God's peace, and know that they can spend an eternity with God. But we begin working it out here by building up the kingdom of God in our midst. Each and every one of us has a work to do. We have a work to do. We need to prepare our hearts to receive and accept God's grace. But we also need to say, Lord, the world is looking at our church. The world is looking at me, my children, my grandchildren. When they say, should I go to church? Is Christ alive? They're looking at you. They're looking at how you live your life. They're looking at the stresses that you have, the way you handle yourself. And, I'm really convicted by this because I have little kids. My kids that, are 6 and 3, and they're at that really cute age. But, man, they can just mirror things back to you and say things that you said, wow, I said that to Uni. Maybe a cutting word, a put down, a dig, and then all of a sudden I see that behavior in Ari, and I'm convicted in my heart. Oh Lord, I am a sinner. I need to really watch what I say, because how I live this gospel message of God's grace. Oh Lord, I need your help. I can't live the good life of living and representing the resurrected Christ. You see, when we all can begin that introspection and say, Lord, show me. Maybe it's through a life group, maybe it's through a prayer group, or maybe it's through a moment of silent prayer and reflection. And we say, Lord, show me. Where are places in my life that I need to let your grace, your Son, Jesus Christ, heal me and take away the fear or anger or pride or arrogance that's keeping me from living that life of grace and peace and love and forgiveness. When the church learns how to do that well, learns how to really, begin rooting out the sin in our lives. Oh, I said it, sin. Meaning that we put the wrong things on the top of the ladder that we're pursuing. And we put God and Jesus Christ there. And we really say, when we say Jesus is Lord, when we say Christ is King, and we really mean that, and we really begin to live that, the world will stand and take place. Because God's grace